Welcome to the March 21st edition of the PFF Forecast. There's a lot of madness going on. A lot of madness. My bracket's completely toast. I had Illinois. I went to a Jesuit school. Somehow I managed to not get that one right.
You went to a school that had Loyola in the name even.
I know. It's embarrassing. It's honestly embarrassing. So bad. So we're going to stick to football here on this podcast. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to talk free agency, the three best moves. We're going to give a little gambling spin to it, talk some division odds, three worst moves. We may go overboard on the three, but we're going to try and set ourselves to that number. We've got NFC South. It's our last division to guess the win totals of. That'll be a lot of fun. And then there are a few new draft props and some updated draft props lines since the last time we talked. It's about to be officially draft season, so it's going to be a great podcast. Let's rock. All right. I said we're going to stick to football. So let's stick to football. We're not going to do any. I'm sure there's like 40 podcasts that have sprung up just for March Madness. We're not one of them.
No. One of the things, interestingly, George, let's take a victory lap on one thing. Okay. We said on this show that the wide receiver market would be soft. Mm-hmm. And it's been soft. Like Kenny Golladay's contract being 18 million APY and everybody throwing their hands up about it because Juju signed for 1 year, 8, and apparently turned down two of the best teams in the league to go back to Pittsburgh. Like, I feel like we nailed that.
The Kenny Golladay contract, it's so interesting because I read the spin zone on all of these things it's just incredible. You know, if the agent writes the tweet for whoever it is, it sounds like this person has just been made the King of England. And if, it's someone trying to talk about the cap sensibility or lack thereof, it's like this deal is horrendous. And so it's very interesting. Like the Trent Williams deal turns out to be basically a 3-year deal with then options on the back end. And the Kenny Golladay deal, it was like, I forget who it was that wrote this, but they were like, it's very similar to what Odell Beckham Jr. got when the cap was around this high. It was like 178. And I was like, okay, but there's a difference here. Like, we understand that the cap is going to go up. There's this huge TV deal that's being announced. I think this says more about receivers that can be drafted that people expect to be very good. And I think a little bit about Kenny Golladay, don't you think?
What do you think about Kenny Golladay that you like that the Giants view him as a 1? Like a 1-1, like this guy is everything to everybody?
Well, no, I was going to say the opposite. I was going to say I think that that not enough teams viewed him in that way, and I'm not sure. I think he's a very, very good wide receiver. Like, where do you put him right now if you were ranking wide receivers? Where would you put Kenny Golladay?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the fact that the Giants and the Bears were competing for him, tells you something because like they're teams that like I would say don't necessarily have it figured out. Mm-hmm. So, but the fact that there was more than one team willing to bid that price up to what it was, it means something. I'd more put him in that 15 range, I guess, 13, 15 for wide receivers. Obviously, I like separation more than I like jump ball ability because I think separation is a more stable trait. But at the same time, like, he's a physical guy and he can do a lot of good things. It's a big price though. And I just don't know with Daniel Jones and that offensive line, whether that's going to be all that whether it's going to have the impact we think it does. And I think the same thing for Smith-Schuster. I think Smith-Schuster is going to look back at his contract with the Steelers and be a little bit upset about it because especially Kansas City just seemed like that's a slam dunk. You're getting all the Sammy Watkins stuff underneath. You might get a little bit of stuff over the top. And now, like, you're going to Pittsburgh where Big Ben's just trying to get rid of it in 2.17.
I was shocked by that. I was shocked. I honestly, this is probably not the reason, but when I heard took a huge pay cut to stay with Pittsburgh, I was like, yeah, bullshit. Okay. Bullshit. That's complete and utter horse crap. there's no way anyone is taking a huge pay cut to stay in Pittsburgh. I've been to Pittsburgh, lovely place, wonderful, wonderful town, great people. Our own Ben Lindsay from Pittsburgh. That
There's
ain't
a
happening.
joke in there that we just can't say though. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah. I came close. Couldn't go all the way, but that's complete crap. I thought this was. I would have gone to Baltimore. And I think I got to be honest with you. I think one of the reasons Juju didn't go to Baltimore is because he'd have to play Pittsburgh twice a year. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but I honestly think they would have turned on him so quickly. And that poor guy would have been decapitated going over the middle of the field, to get his 4-yard slant for his 8th catch of the game for 32 yards. And it would not have been pretty. Why he didn't go to Kansas City, I have absolutely no idea. If I were a receiver, I would have been praying to go to Kansas City for a year. Like praying.
Well, and now you look and like they're clearly looking for sort of like there's a type, right? I threw out the names of T.Y. Hilton.
Who do you think? Yeah, give me your guys.
I think it's going to be a bigger guy. I think it's going to be like somebody like Josh Reynolds. Ultimately, like
really
a guy who's like 6'3", 190. I've been doing a little research on this. Runs faster on the field than his 40 time would suggest. Like guys like that who are of value, right? And I'm going to talk about that a little bit with Tyus Bowser with a signing too, where there are some guys who like we found this out, and I think kudos to Brad for saying this a few weeks ago and using it as research this summer. Draft stock and priors dragged along with all of these players this week.
Leonard Floyd.
I think like so for Kansas City, like they're a smallish team on offense. Edwards-Helaire is small. Kelsey's a small tight end, like physically. Hill, Hardman, even Watkins to be that big receiver is small. I think they're looking for size, and that's why I think they wanted Smith-Schuster. I think they bypass guys like Hilton, Adam Humphries, guys like that. I think that they're going to go more of a more physical guy, or maybe just a number 2 tight end who can get scores. Like I think Darren Fells. By the way, Darren Fells is the 6th highest graded player in the red zone over the last 2 years. It's like 14 to 17 with 10 touchdowns. I think they go more that direction. Juju would have fit in really nicely with them, but unfortunately, like it's crazy. But like I don't think he had much of a market. But then he chooses it. Like he kind of just like went on tilt, went back to Pittsburgh. It's weird.
Did you see the comment where he was like, "Yeah, I love Sam Darnold. I'd love to see Sam Darnold in Pittsburgh. I mean, I love Big Ben, but it'll be interesting to see who the next quarterback is because it ain't going to be as good as what he was going to have in Kansas City, and probably not as good as what he'd have in Baltimore either. Like obviously Lamar Jackson is great, but just throwing.
Baltimore having a wide receiver who could take passes in that like short range and turn them into 8-9 yard gains is really what they need, right? The weird thing about the Ravens is they don't have a robust passing game to the running backs, right? Even though they have talented running backs, their tight end is more. Their tight ends aren't even like short receivers. Their tight ends are sort of middle of the field, high ADOT guys, and obviously they have Hollywood going over the top with kind of like mediocre hands underneath. Like the Juju would have fit in well with them too. Like it's an unreal projection on Juju's part. He must know something about he must like Dwayne Haskins.
No comment. I do want to take the Kenny Golladay stuff. We talked about the NFC least last week, and I'm still all aboard on the Washington football team at 3-1. The Cowboys are plus 100, Eagles plus 425. The Giants still behind the Eagles somehow at plus 500. And I don't think, Kenny Golladay is moving that number a ton. I will say this. I think it is kind of absurd that the Giants have longer odds than the Eagles.
You mean like they have a lower probability to win the NFC?
Yeah, they're plus 500. The Eagles are plus 425.
The Eagles are a tank, man. The Eagles, like the Eagles will not like they by the way got a great signing this weekend or Friday.
Yes,
I can't remember when
Anthony
I was doing
Harris.
the Sirius show, but they got Anthony Harris. It's a great signing for them.
Yeah.
But they're not in any position. I mean, and nor do they want to be, right? Like I can't. I would take the Giants in a win total like prop over the Eagles.
Yes,
quite a bit, just because of the incentives. Like the Giants, At this point, Joe Judge has a bigger incentive to win games than
say what you want about Joe
Samaria
Judge.
does.
Say what you want about Joe Judge, and we may laugh at what he says in press conferences. It's still better than whatever the heck the Eagles are putting out there. I will also say this. People got very mad at me. I said, look, I would bet the football team 3-1. In fact, I think if I had to pick between them and the Cowboys right now, I'd pick them. And I mentioned that Fitzpatrick is a pretty darn good quarterback, to put in there. And I looked this up, man. Like, he has as many top 10 graded seasons as Dak does over the last 3 years. Their grades are actually very similar. Now, I would rather have Dak. I think Dak is on the upward swing. I completely agree. I'd rather have Dak, right? But my point was simply that was a really good team that had horrible quarterback play. And Fitzpatrick has played pretty darn well. He's been in that 10 to 15 range over the past 3 seasons and has been on some really bad teams. And this team will be a little bit better. But that division is still interesting. Let's go to these three moves that we like the most. Why don't you kick us off?
Okay, my favorite move is the aforementioned Tyus Bowser, 4 years, $22 million, to go back to Baltimore. This just shows, I think, a really good understanding of the game of football on the part of the Ravens. So they have, they have 2 edge rushers who are relatively productive last year in Matthew Judon and Yannick Ngakoue. And they opt to keep 2 edge rushers who are on a per play basis every bit as effective in Pernell McPhee and Tyus with relatively no money. I mean, 4 years, $22 million for a starting edge player in the NFL, one with a free 2nd round pedigree and really good, he is explosive. You look at all the metrics and stuff, he's great. He's like when the Bears signed Pernell McPhee away from the Ravens in 2015, it was sort of a similar thing where you had relatively few snaps, but very productive. And now the Ravens, knowing that, this sort of the opposite of one of these bad signings I'll talk about. The Ravens know that they put certain players in great positions to succeed. One of them is their offensive lineman, which that's why they're not rushing to give Orlando Brown what he wants, but also edge players, right? Matthew Judon, Yannick Ngakoue, very much a product of a system where the defensive backs make it easier on the edge defenders to get home. And so they take a guy who I think is every bit as talented, and instead of paying him $13 million a year, which is what Yannick Ngakoue got from the Raiders, or I believe $16 million a year, which is Matthew Judon got from the New England Patriots, they go ahead and give about $5.5 million to Bowser.
Well, I was going to say one of my least favorite signings was the Judon signing by the Patriots. I thought that the Patriots did one of the worst jobs of spending a lot of money that I've seen. I felt like the Patriots did this. The Patriots won the lottery, had all this cap space, and instead of going and buying like nice things, like going to Neiman Marcus or, the Mercedes dealership, they went to Target. Just give me all the pink Barbie Jeeps that you've got.
Well, and the interesting thing is, it just shows a lack of trust. Like, it looks like they're on tilt because honestly, they haven't drafted well in a long time. But Josh Uche was actually a good pick. If you look at his pass rushing statistics last year, if you look at like his get off rate, all that kind of stuff, he was actually a good player in that Kyle Van Noy sort of role. And what do? Instead of being like, oh, we actually hit on this one, let's press this luck, they say, no, we're going to make sure that we get this thing right by signing Judon to 16 and then re-signing Kyle Van Noy. So what is Uche going to do? Is he going to play a lot? Is he going to be like a player who, like, to me, it makes you –
They're going to put him on offense.
It just shows a misunderstanding, I think, of sort of like the last 10 drafts, everybody's going to be like, oh, the Patriots suck. No, the Patriots got unlucky in those drafts to a large degree. There's nothing systemic about poor drafting, really. And instead of like just being like just kind of trusting your process and going through that, they were like, even in a situation where they hit on a draft pick, they're already moving on from that. Like, it's weird to me.
It's very interesting. And your point is great. We'll talk about that more as we get into the draft and explain it more for anyone that's new listening to this podcast. But like, your greatest skill in the draft is having the humility to draft a lot and not think that you know more than the system. Because honestly, it shows that it's basically luck at that point. So I'm going to move around my three to kind of correlate with what you're talking about, because one of mine is from this same division, the AFC North, and I pulled up their odds. Ravens plus 110. This is from DraftKings on the DraftKings Sportsbook app. Cleveland Browns plus 175. The Steelers, who we just talked about, plus 350, and the Bengals are 25-1. Okay, John Johnson, the third, Cleveland safety, 3 years, 34 million. And I contrasted this with what I thought. Look, I liked what the Ravens did with Tyus Bowser, but let's be very real. The Ravens offense is still a huge question mark. And the Ravens have done nothing to address the fact that their offensive weapons, aside from Lamar Jackson and running back, are not good. Okay. And what the Cleveland Browns are doing is continuing to understand, I think, what wins football games, which is dynamic, kind of positionless football on the defensive end, on the defensive side of things, and a really well schemed offense. And so I love that signing. It was one of my favorites. It happened day one. And if I look at these odds, I really like the Browns plus 175, especially in relation to what the Ravens did. Neither of them did anything super splashy, but I thought one team got substantially better. John Johnson, a guy that wore the green dot with the best defense in the NFL, aside from his injury-shortened season, has been a top safety, fourth highest graded coverage grade among safeties last year. Brandon Staley talked about this guy like he was Jesus Christ walking on water when he went on the Chris Collinsworth and Richard Sherman podcast, which, by the way, great listen. So I love that signing.
Yeah, Johnson was one of mine. It's really hard to make a case. If you talk about smartest teams in the NFL, I think everybody gravitates towards Baltimore, which is, I think, fair. But it's really hard to leave out Cleveland. I mean, the moves that they've made, especially since Stefanski got there and Andrew Berry got there.
I'm giving Kwesi all the credit.
And Kwesi too. It's extremely like they just give themselves a shot. Like, it doesn't mean Baker's going to work out, but they give themselves a shot. Another team that I think you have to lump into that very smart category made one of my three favorite signings as well, aside from Bowser and Johnson, and that's Emmanuel Sanders. I think getting him at $6 million a year to replace John Brown, he's more of a I think he's more durable than John Brown. He's a down the field player, maybe not quite as fast.
He's more dynamic, right? Like Emmanuel Sanders will do more all around
for sure. And he gives Josh Allen, when you look at that offense, you still have Beasley, you still have Gabriel Davis. I believe did the Zach Ertz thing fall through, or
it has not happened yet?
Okay, yeah. I mean, they still probably need a tight end, but they play a lot of 10 personnel anyway, and they have running backs who can break tackles, especially. Like, their offense is just really complete. And I think Sanders does a good job of going in and completing that group.
You're doing a great job. We didn't talk about this beforehand, but we're just rolling through the divisions in great order here. I loved that the Bills brought in Sanders. But I'm going to go to the Dolphins and what they did bring in Will Fuller, 1 year, $10 million. And I look at this here. The Patriots are now plus 350, as are the Miami Dolphins. And I don't want to be this guy where I go, look, the Bills added Stephon Diggs and look what happened to Josh Allen. Okay, I don't want to be that guy and then go put that on another team. But I do want to remind people that the Miami Dolphins receivers were Fitz receivers. They were, give me a shot, put it up there, throw well into contested situations. Mm-hmm. And Tua is let me find the guy that's going to get open. But if guys aren't getting open, especially over the middle of the field and down the football field, he's not going to look good. And I think this signing, Will Fuller, now he's got to play 10 plus games, but he's not going to be Stephon Diggs. But he had an 87 PFF grade last year. This guy was a bona fide number one receiver, not top five, maybe like Stephon Diggs, but a bona fide number one receiver. To get him for $10 million, to see what Tua gives you, because if you're going to stick with Tua, you can't not know. And so whether they stick with Tua or if they go out and get another quarterback, I love this move. And I think I would bet the Dolphins plus 350 right now, especially given that the Patriots are also plus 350. And I just think the Dolphins are a much deeper team. And
the Jets might be a year away, so they're not really a contender there.
They're 15-1, yeah.
Even Bills are minus 155. I honestly think the Jets are moving in
the right direction.
Carl Lawson. Well, I think I still like Bowser at 5.5 million a year more
Mhm.
than I like Lawson at 15. Lawson at 15 is not terrible at all either. I like that. One of the other things to think about if you are Miami, you're picking at 3 because Houston gave that pick to you for Laramie Tunsil. The thought process might be to take Sewell there, which I don't hate. Obviously offensive tackles we found are
Mhm.
extremely expensive when they're elite in Trent Williams. But trading back or even just staying there and taking Jamar Chase is not a bad move. If you're going to buy into Tua, really buy into Tua and take a guy like Chase, and then your 3 wide receiver sets look like Fuller, Chase, Devontae Parker. By the way, 2 of those 3 receivers have had historically injury-riddled careers, but have all had good ceilings. You not only give yourself top end stuff, but you also raise your floor a little bit by putting 3 wide receivers as your starters that are all great. And even if one of them gets hurt, you have 2 great receivers and guys like Preston Williams and the often aforementioned Jakeem Grant behind them. Like that would make for a pretty great offense.
I like that path. I also really like the trade down with a quarterback hungry team and grab, if not Chase, who I wouldn't be shocked if he fell to them if they trade down with, say a team that's trying to get past the Eagles or something. And you go to, if you can get in that, like, 7, 8, 9, 10 range, you get another receiver.
Jamar Chase, by the way,
Now is it minus 250 now?
Almost neck and neck with Jalen Waddle, I believe, to go first wide receiver take. No, it was Devontae Smith, and that market has widened quite a bit. I think Chase is like minus 225 to be the first wide receiver taken. If you will listen to us, could have got him at like minus 150 on this show. But I think that one, I think he's probably better than 50-50 get to go in the top 6 picks even, let alone be the number 1 wide receiver.
I want to give you my last of my 3 favorites, and this was a tough one to pick, but I liked it because it was one team's blunder and another team's great pickup. And this is This is Denver grabbing Kyle Fuller. I mean, this is
for less than what the Vikings got Patrick Peterson for. It's unbelievable. I mean,
this is just incompetence. I do not know. The Bears are a wreck. And the Broncos are a really good team. They're a really good team, and they just need to have not one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL. Yeah. I'm a little disappointed that the Broncos didn't go try and get like Ryan Fitzpatrick. I'm a little disappointed that they have not been a little more active. I don't know if that means they're going to do something in the draft, but they have to, man. They cannot. They are such a good team that if they roll in with Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton, KJ Hamler, Noah Fant, and then a defense that has Kyle Fuller, Justin Simmons, Von Miller, even I'll throw Bradley Chubb in there. And then you roll out Drew freaking Lock. And nothing against Drew Lock, but he's just, fact of the matter is, like, one of the lowest graded quarterbacks in the NFL last year. But I love this move because Kyle Fuller is a guy. Vic Fangio was clearly the key in Chicago. Comes over to Denver. He's grabbing all his guys. And I expect Kyle Fuller to be fantastic in Fangio's system once again. Broncos are 14-1. Raiders are 13-1. Chargers are 5-1. The Chiefs are minus 400 to win that division.
Minus 400, by the way, bigger than it was last week. So despite all the moves, people laying the number with the Chiefs, even though last week we said, like, I don't hate Denver at 14-1. No. I don't like the Chargers where their current number is. I think they're a little overrated, but 14-1. The Denver Broncos are a quarterback away, really. I mean, it'll be interesting. We talked about this, I think, on the Sirius show, me and Austin. If you are the Denver Broncos, let's say you have to settle for the 4th best quarterback in the draft. There are actually 2 really distinct choices, and it might be a different choice depending upon the team you are. Would you take Mac Jones and the sort of like, he's probably ready to play and be competent day one and get you competitive? Or do you take Trey Lance knowing that it's probably more like a Mahomes-like trajectory and that he probably has to sit a year or 6 games or 8 games or whatever but his ceiling's way higher? Which one do you choose, given that you're Denver, and even though you're sort of ready to win, you're also in a division that's going to be really tough to win, even if you are ready?
I was told there would be no SAT questions on this podcast. This is a really fascinating question because
Thank you. You're welcome.
Because as a 14-1 Denver Broncos better, I would take Mac Jones because I think Mac Jones gives you a better shot this year, and because they have they have a really nice receiving core. I mean, Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, Noah Fant, KJ Hamler, that's awesome. And so if you get a guy that can throw accurately and understand route concepts, which is what Mac Jones does, you could be a really good team. Oh man, I would need to know more. I think if you're the Broncos, you need to do all of your homework on Trey Lance. You need to put him through the ringer if you possibly can, understand his intelligence, because you're going to ask Trey Lance to come in and learn. And you have to gauge whether he's a guy that is confident in his own ability to learn and whether he can do that. And if so, I'm always the guy that likes the high ceiling. You know this.
Because I think the answer is different if you're San Francisco. Because I'll go. So my answer is for Denver, it's Trey Lance, and it's one of those where all those players on your team, except for the Fullers and the Simmons just got signed. The window is actually relatively wide for you on offense, which is really all that matters. So I would take Trey Lance. If I'm San Francisco, I'd take Mac Jones because the window is narrower.
Yeah, that's fascinating. You got me thinking about something, and this may kibosh us getting through more of our least and favorite picks. But the smartest teams in the NFL, as you see them, like what's our top three? If we were to say, because I do think two of them are in the AFC North.
Yeah, no, I think, okay, this is my opinion. I think the actual hard question is who's 4, 5, 6. Because I think 1, 2, 3 is Buffalo, Baltimore, Cleveland.
Yep, we're in strong agreement there.
But I think 4, you can make a case for. You can make a case for Indianapolis. You can make a case.
I think you can make a case for Miami.
You can make a case for Miami very much. By the way, these are all AFC teams, which is kind of crazy to think about.
Yeah. I will say this, to put an NFC team in there, Jason Licht does not get enough credit for what he's done in Tampa Bay with, how he's approached the draft. And their team
and free agency. Shaq Barrett was signed for $4 million. You know, it's like, that's a good one. I'm trying to think of an NFC team, and it's actually really difficult.
It's fascinating. I would really like to put
maybe Philly, but Philly's lost some of their cachet in that regard, given how much it sort of is.
Yeah, they're struggling a little bit. I think the Cowboys. The funny thing is, the Cowboys have all the resources to be. The Cowboys should be, and a lot of their moves are.
They have smart people that work for them. I just don't know necessarily if they're being listened to as much. But that's a great question, and I think that this is what I'll always say. If you're 32nd, the distance between you and 1 is pretty big, but the distance between you and 5 is smaller than in any other major sport.
It's so true, and that's exactly what this conversation is illustrating. We got 1 through 3 easy, and 4, 5, 6 is.
But if you're 30 in Major League Baseball, if you're the least analytically inclined team in Major League Baseball, you're a decade away from 5. I think. So that's what's cool about football is like there's going to be a team that sort of sneaks up on us relatively soon. Like Buffalo, it wasn't that long. And I'll say this one last thing before we move on. Tanking works. Everybody says tanking. Remember that our first year of studying football together, George, 2017, the Bills played the Vikings first preseason game. The next day, they traded Sammy Watkins to the Rams. They traded Ronald Darby to the Eagles. And everybody said, this team is tanking, right? And they even failed the tank by Tyrod Taylor playing too well. And they tried to insert Nathan Peterman against San Diego with those 7 interceptions or whatever.
Oh, they inserted him.
They couldn't even put him. They couldn't even put him in there to complete the tank. They make the playoffs, so they have to trade up for Josh Allen, trade up for Tremaine Edmonds, and look at where that team is now. And then you look at a team in their division, Miami, who in 2019 was tanking, and now, right, 10-6 the next year, and a team right now where I think a lot of people, if you say, what are some of the bright spots in the NFL? Dolphins are in a decent place. Tanking works.
No, it's a great point. I'm going to give you a couple of my least favorites, and we'll move on. You can give me a couple of yours too. The Joe Thuney one, signing a guard for that much money, I can't get behind it. I can't respect it. I have no idea what 5 years, $80 million is doing for you at the guard
I think
position.
there's a chance they'll play him at center or tackle, but that's a projection, and unfortunately, kept them. It didn't keep them out of the Trent Williams thing, but it made them less aggressive, right? Like, they pushed at that for a while and ultimately had to pull out because it was going to be too much.
I do think it's interesting. You mentioned this with the big wide receiver for the Chiefs. The Chiefs, to me, I think, are reacting not just to what happened up front, but overall they were bullied physically, and so I think that's what the moves.
I'll say this about the Chiefs in defense of them, even though I don't agree with the Thuney signing. If you watch what's happening with Seattle and you watch what's happening in Houston, it's clear that a huge contract is not enough to make your star quarterback happy. Mm-hmm. And I think the pursuit of wide receivers and offensive linemen, even if their negative EV does add some positive EV in the sense that Mahomes, a lot of the Chiefs, I think, worldview over the next 10 years is centered on continuously being able to go to Mahomes for cap relief, like that contract. Mm-hmm. And they did it this year. And if your quarterback is happy and with the understanding that you're consistently trying to make the team better and sort of in a sort of LeBron way where like he kind of runs the show, I think that there's a little bit of value there that maybe we're not picking up on, even if all those like Joe Thuney's a negative EV move, right?
100%. Yeah, I get where you're coming from. You're making the quarterback happy. I think that's a really rose-colored glasses. It's the only way
that I can explain this move.
Yeah, it's a phenomenally rose-colored glasses way of looking at things. I can't believe that you're a Chiefs fan. I'm shocked that you, a Chiefs supporter, has come up with this incredible spin zone on signing a guard for $80 million. I don't want to talk more about it. We've already belabored that point. I want to give you one more.
My least favorite signing. I got two. I got a high price one and I got a low price one.
Boom. Hit me.
The low price one that's awful is Gerard Davis to the Jets.
Yeah, he's just not.
Gerard Davis is a minimum contract player. I'm sorry. And especially in a Salah defense, you need to be able to cover. And he can't he can blitz. That's it. He is a Bill Belichick minimum contract linebacker. And then the other one is Bud Dupree. I think Bud Dupree I think that's an awful signing.
Yeah, I hope it works out for Big Bud. For anyone who's unfamiliar, your boy Bud Dupree decided to take to Twitter to call me an idiot for saying the Steelers were overrated. Tears his ACL. Steelers, turns out, very overrated. And now he's going to go to a Titans.
Now he's going to have to carry a Tennessee defense. It's an awful lot lighter without.
Are you ready? The Tennessee Titans are going to be overrated this season. You're welcome. Yeah. It's tough. It's sorry. I don't want to do it. I don't want to, but I have to.
Are they going to be the worst defense in football?
They're going to be atrocious. They're not going to be very good on offense either, I don't think. The signing that I want to talk about, because I have a spin zone for it, is this Kenyon Drake signing. Like paying a guy it's going to be what I think top 13 running back money. So the Raiders signed Kenyon Drake. They have Brandon Jacobs, and I'm trying to figure out.
You said Brandon Jacobs, but it's the same thing.
Oh, Josh Jacobs. Brandon Jacobs is a
former Niners great.
Yeah, an all-time great running back that was tantalizing and frustrating. I can't believe I'm Brandon Jacobs. Josh Jacobs. Okay, they have Josh Jacobs. They go get Kenyon Drake, and it's like this makes no sense. But I have a spin zone for you here. Are the Raiders setting themselves up to put Josh Jacobs and Derek Carr and
on the market
picks and ship them to Seattle for Russell Wilson?
Seattle? Houston could use another running back.
Yeah, that's a good point. All I'm getting at is that to me is the only way that signing makes sense is if Josh Jacobs is now a part of a deal and for some unknown reason you feel like you need a veteran running back in there. But that to me is what the Raiders have to be trying to do. Whether they can get it done or not, I don't know. Then you go bring in Richard Sherman too. You're a win now team in Vegas. I mean, they are a team that is young, but man, if they can find a way to start being competitive now, I think they got to do it. So that was a terrible signing that could work out in the long run. It's my rose-colored glasses part of
Nice.
the podcast for you.
Nice.
All right, let's do some NFC South win totals here. So we've been guessing the win totals. Of course, we don't know if there's going to be 17 games or not. So we're assuming 16. We've been guessing what the win totals are going to be. It leads to a fun conversation. We have one division left. It is the division that a lot has gone on in and includes the Super Bowl champion Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the NFC South. Let's start. So that the Saints went 12-4. They won the division. The Bucs went 11-5. The Panthers 5-11, and the Falcons 4-12. Why don't we start with our Atlanta Falcons? Their win total last year was 7.5. They obviously went way under. What do you think their win total will be this year?
6.5.
Oh my God, really? I'm gonna have to take out a mortgage now.
So I'm guessing you're at 8.
I said 8. Oh my God, this is one of our biggest discrepancies. And I was close to 8.5, Eric. The Atlanta Falcons had a point differential of negative 18.
Mm-hmm.
There were only 2 last place teams in a division with a point differential of negative 20 or better.
Yes.
And that was the Falcons and the Niners. Every other team that was last place in a division was getting destroyed. Okay. Mm-hmm. I think there was one team that was at like negative 78, and then everyone else was negative like 125 or worse. And so the Falcons to me were a not nearly as bad as their record team that had a disaster of a situation culturally and like schematically and
spiritually.
Yeah, the whole thing. And I just am such a believer in this. A well-defined, well-schemed offense is the cure for everything. Like it just makes the rooms smell better, the jokes are funnier, your wives are hotter. Like it's the whole fucking deal. And Arthur Smith is going to bring the well-schemed offense to Atlanta. They have a top 5 pick. They can get a legit difference maker.
Yeah.
If it's 6.5, Eric, we're going to have to spend more than 5 days in Vegas in May because I don't know what I'm going to do.
Yeah. I mean, I think 6.5 is low, but I think it's what it's going to be. If you look at the odds on DraftKings, what are the Falcons to win? They're the lowest team in the NFC South, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're 11-1. 11-1, I'm sorry, right? Was the last time. That was what I bet. I bet just, full disclosure, I bet Atlanta at 11-1 to win the South. And I just think that like 6.5 is, assuming a 16-game season, 6.5 is congruent with that. The Falcons currently are 12-1.
Yes.
And our Panthers, although there's not that big of a difference between 12-1 and 7-1, Panthers are 7-1.
But that has to be Watson.
But then how do you explain New Orleans at plus 250?
I don't understand that at all. I don't.
And that has been basically the same. I think it was 225 before free agency. So I think it's 6.5 because to stay congruent with that market. Mm-hmm. But the other thing, there are some systemic issues with Atlanta. You look at over our friends at overthecap.com. They have 6 players, with more than a $10 million cap number. One of them is Dante Fowler. Another one is Jake Matthews, who they can't get out from under, right? That's going to keep them possibly from Sewell, which we think is probably a good thing. Deion Jones, who's been up and down and, off and on the injury list. And then they have 3 guys over 20. Grady Jarrett, who's great, but plays interior defensive line. Julio Jones at 23, who's a 32-year-old wide receiver who they can't cut unless they want it to cost $18 million in dead money. And then Matt Ryan, who they just restructured, who's a good quarterback, don't get me wrong, but has at times let that team down in some really frustrating ways. I look at that, and then I look at your obviously new coach, which we like the new coach, by the way. We like him. But you have a new coach, new general manager. We've seen success stories in that realm too, but we've also seen Carolina last year. We've also seen, situations where it takes a year to sort of get everything in order. And I wonder if, part of me is saying half the time I think Atlanta can compete in this division, and the other half of the time I think they're using this as a reset year.
Okay. I came with a little data here. All of this you can get, by the way, with the PFF Edge subscription, pff.com, and you can get it for 30% off right now with the promo code FreeAgency30. I'm currently looking at Matt Ryan's quarterback annual page, and there are some things that make 6.5 just delicious, scrumptious. Matt Ryan, grade from a clean pocket last year, 6th. Big time throw percentage, 15th. Now, we talked about this with actually this exact same team and Matt Ryan with Shanahan. His positively graded throw rate went way down when Shanahan left. It was like, oh, shit. You can still be a good quarterback, but if you're not having opportunities schemed for you to make positively graded, big-time graded throws, you can't make them. And I think that's what Matt Ryan needs, and that's what Arthur Smith is going to bring exactly. I think Calvin Ridley and Julio Jones are a situation of legitimately having 2 ones on a team, and that is amazing. And Matt Ryan is a poor man's Tom Brady. I'm just going to say it, okay? Matt Ryan is not going to have, MR2, okay? He's not going to come out with his own protein line, but he's taking care of himself in a similarly aggressive fashion. I think he's going to age really, really well. He's the type of guy who's going to work on his mechanics to improve and to keep his arm strength as best he can. And I think everyone is sleeping on them. I've said this every year, I guess, in some way, shape, or form, but I just really believe that now it's like the bottom has fallen out in terms of perception in the public and the market, and I am here to buy it.
Cool. I'm
Thank you for
ready
coming to my
fight.
TED Talk.
Okay. I think a lot of Ryan, and this might be the year where they have, far less impediments to success, both on the defensive side of the ball and on the offensive side of the ball too. But like their offense has never been an issue. It's always been like they can't stop a nosebleed. So speaking of not being able to stop a nosebleed, where do you have the
Yes,
Panthers?
The Carolina Panthers. I have the Carolina Panthers. Last year, win total was 5.5. So I had the Panthers at 6.5.
I do too.
And this is me kind of saying, look, I don't know if they're going to be able to get Deshaun Watson in large part because I think right now, given the shit show that is going around with Deshaun Watson, I just think it's going to be hard to know for sure whether you want to trade for him. Like, this is a disaster. Yeah. And the allegations are horrible. And if there's any truth to them, I don't know if Deshaun Watson is going to be playing quarterback in the NFL. And you don't want to obviously offer a huge package for him. So,
well, the two outcomes, right, are he's either Bill Cosby, right, or Houston is somebody's doing some sort of character assassination that would make a trade for him in the next month extremely unlikely, yes. Right?
So it's either Bill Cosby or they're doing a 30 for 30 next right? year about the greatest fucking shit show in sports history.
Exactly, but neither one of those has him moving to a different team in the next. Because if he the way that the courts are, this is going to be held up for quite some time, right? So we're not going to know whether these allegations are true or false or whatever for a while, and which is really, I mean, from a football standpoint, from an NFL standpoint, it's unfortunate because there are two teams, the Jets and the Miami Dolphins, who have the capital to make this sort of once in a lifetime situation work out. But anyway,
it's a really good point. It sucks because, okay, so you look at the Panthers. I think if I were forced to, I do think I would bet over 6.5. I really think the team that could potentially stink here are the Saints. And I think both the Panthers and the Falcons are on the come up, and both of them have an opportunity to add to their team, whereas the Saints are just trying to keep the bottom from falling out in many respects. So I think at 6.5, I would go over if I had to, which I don't say very often. And look, Teddy Bridgewater, I mean, he's spunky, say that, he's not a guy that's going to lose you a ton of games. And I think he's a guy next year, I think he was a guy that this year we talked about, you kind of feel good about betting with Teddy Bridgewater. Like he's gonna be a dog in most situations, but he's gonna give you a chance to get through the back door. I know he's your guy, and that's probably the nicest I can possibly say about him.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. To your point about New Orleans, so this is where like I throw the disrespect their way. I have them at 7.5.
Yeah, I have New Orleans at 8. Last year was 10.5.
I mean, Jameis has had one winning season in his career in a 9-7 year in the second year with Tampa. I mean, my heart says, bet over with him, but my brain says no way, right? So, but I think 7.5 is right, which means like, George, do we have a division other than the AFC West where the leader is going to have this big of a win total advantage? I mean, I don't even think in the AFC West you're going to have this big of a win total advantage.
Yeah.
You have the Chiefs with a sizable edge to win the division. Probably shows you how laying the number with the Chiefs is a bad bet. But like, to me, I have Tampa at a certain number that's way higher than all three of these teams.
Yeah, I'm in the same spot. I mean, it's interesting what you said about Jameis. I mean, you look at Bridgewater, he was 5th in avoiding negatively graded plays. Like he did a really nice job there, very accurate. And I do think there's a little bit of, look, if Joe Brady gets a second year to work with him and those receivers, they could be really good. And you could say the same thing for Jameis Winston. Like he has now his second year. The issue with the Saints that I don't think is being talked about enough is they have Alvin Kamara. Okay, he's phenomenal, but he's a running back. He's catching the ball at most a couple of yards past line of scrimmage. And then you have Michael Thomas, who's also not, he's catching the ball 7 yards past the line of scrimmage. They don't have a ton of diversity and playmakers on that offense. They're losing Emmanuel Sanders. They've lost both their tight ends. Like, are they going to play Taysom Hill at tight end? I just don't think that the Saints are all that good of a team. And that's, again, why I have the Bucs. I toyed around with putting them at 11.5. I have them at 11.
I have them at 11.5. I mean, I think they're very similar to the Chiefs right now, in that they're running it back. They have an established coach with nothing to lose anymore, right? It's going to be more creative, I think, than he had been previously. Todd Bowles stays, which was a small underdog maybe, but he obviously great. And, there's obviously things that can go pear-shaped for them, like, I mean, they just signed a kicker to a multi-year deal. Like, there are a lot of things that, like, obviously long-term, I think once Brady retires, they're going to fall off a cliff, I think. But currently, to me, they're probably going to be the favorite in the NFC and should be. And I have them at 11.5. Just like I said, I think this one's going to be one where if you hang on 11, a lot of people it's going to be 11.5 before.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I wrote 11.5, and I don't. The tough thing about the Bucs, and this is why I ended up going with 11, but I can see why it's probably going to end up being 11.5. They had a ton of really good injury luck, and I just don't. They won't get that again. They're playing a first. Well, actually, they're not playing a first place schedule. That's a good point. So I don't know. I see that regressing a little bit. I think their defense will regress a little bit, just like by the nature of the beast. But dude, Tom Brady was so good last year. I mean, so good last year.
Yeah.
And there's just no reason to try and predict his demise. I mean, he was 3rd in positively graded throw rate, 4th in grade from a clean pocket. He avoided turnover-worthy throws and made big-time throws at top 5 rates each. I mean, that's absolutely insane. He was fucking amazing. And that's why they're
NFC East and the AFC East are the NFC South's off division schedule this year. So you're getting the Eagles, the Jets. I mean, you're getting some luck there from a schedule perspective. If you're Tampa, which might, again, I think if Atlanta's hung at 6.5, which I can't see how it's not given the division odds, right?
Mm-hmm.
If Atlanta's hung at 6.5 with the schedule they have, 4th place schedule, and also getting to play the NFC East, like I'm obviously like you, I'm going to go over, which is kiss of death on Atlanta, but it also works in Tampa Bay's favor as sort of like an opportunity for a 12-4 season is right there.
It may be the kiss of death, but at least you can sound like you know what you're talking about, and you tell people you've made a really smart bet. So you know you've got that going for you. You can walk into a party and be like, "Hey, this is a bet I made." Well, actually, you can't really walk into a party right now, but maybe in a couple months. All right, let's close out with some draft props. We've discussed a bunch in a couple of previous episodes, and we're obviously going to get some more as we get closer. Why don't you pick a couple, and we'll talk about them here to close out the show.
On our friends DraftKings Sportsbook, they posted some first X to be drafted on the defensive side of the ball, and I have a few. I've except for Javonte Williams, I've mostly gone with favorites in those markets because I think that makes sense. There are a couple here though that are underdogs that I think are great bets. So here's one. At linebacker, I like of Notre Dame, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah at 4-1. Currently, Parsons of Penn State is minus 305, which I understand that. But I do think that there are people can you see a path to this? Yes. I think some people will see Parsons as sort of like a traditional off-ball linebacker that you don't want anything to do with. And Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah is sort of that athlete that everybody's looking for. So that's one I like. And then my last one, I have three, but I'll put two out there and see if you like this here. For first defensive lineman taken, I like Christian Barmore at 7-1.
This was my favorite.
Gregory Rousseau is plus 175. Kwity Paye is 2-1, and Jalen Phillips is plus 250. I could see any of those guys being picked first. If I'm getting 7-1 at the best player at his position, when you clump two positions together, there's going to be some team that's like, I need a defensive tackle. And if they happen to be, they happen to be picking before the first team that says, I need an edge guy, you're winning this bet at 7-1.
With the fourth pick in the 2021 NFL draft, the Atlanta Falcons select Christian Barmore, defensive tackle, Alabama.
To put with Grady Jarrett.
Yes. No, the Barmore one was the one that I had circled, and a lot on the offense side of the ball, we've gotten really good closing line value, to use a term that's sort of correctly. With Jamar Chase, as you mentioned, Javonte Williams, we talked about him at 7-1. He's now 4-1. We also talked about Najee Harris when he was not the favorite, when he was like plus 130. Now he is the favorite. He's flipped with Etienne. And we've talked about Zach Wilson, of course, as well. The linebacker one I think is interesting. I just don't think anyone really knows with some of these less scrutinized positions. A lot of it also comes down to scheme as well. And so you're just going to be in a good spot if you are betting 4, 5, 6, 7-1 underdogs who performed well in college. And just go check it out. Go look at the PFF NFL draft guide and look at some of these guys. There's going to be, you can make a case for either of, these defensive players who have been studs to be the first guy taken. And so if you get odds like that, I think it's a win.
Here's another one that's interesting, by the way, where you can see value. I don't think that this one happens, but at 7-1, it's probably worth a stab in the very same way that like Henry Ruggs was worth a stab last year. Caleb Farley and Patrick Surtain are both plus 110 to be the first corner taken. Neither one of those really has value, in my opinion, because like they're basically even, much in the same way that CeeDee Lamb and Jerry Jeudy were even last year. However, if a team likes J.C. Horn, like they're going to take him first, and it's at 7-1 right now. To me, the prices of Farley and Surtain make this one, I think artificially high at a position where I would say cornerback might be the position where the public has things ordered so much more differently than everybody else does. And in the same way that CJ Henderson went first last year, when at this time he was, I think, something like 3-1 or 4-1 to be the first corner taken. We had Trayvon Diggs and Christian Fulton. All those guys had like props in the first round, end up going in the second round. Jalen Johnson as well. Like this is a position where unpredictability, I think, reigns supreme, and allow yourself to capitalize on that with a little J.C. Horn plus 7.5 or plus 700.
I like both those guys. I do think that I would bet on Caleb Farley.
I think he's the better one, but people haven't seen him play in a year, right? Like that's
Yeah, that is a good point. I wonder how much people. I would like to know how much that's being talked about. It's probably too much.
Same.
Um, all right. This was a fantastic podcast, as advertised. I really enjoyed it. Eric will be back in studio on Wednesday, and we'll probably getting ready for the draft. Man, I don't think there are too many more free agency moves. We might get a trade, so there's always that. But yeah, brother, I'll see you in a little bit.